Freedom. What is freedom? And how freedom gets stolen from us in the name of freedom. Now, spoiler, I will explain it at the end of the video a little bit more, but just to define it, the foundation for freedom is human dignity. Okay? Whatever is defined in any set of rules, laws, or norms, if it's not guaranteeing fundamentals of human dignity, it's not freedom. It's not a free society. So what is happening with so much speeches today of freedom, so much directions of societies and politics on freedom, and still being a meanings to an end of a much less free society. So the other day I was looking at speeches of a certain conservative conference. I got interested because one of the conservative, maybe the only conservative commentator on the New York Times was having a speech there, and the speech was very good. He was one of the conservatives I absolutely can relate to and agree with. So it got me interested into listening to the speech of other speakers, and to my shocking horror, after this I felt like I watch talks in a mental asylum, except this is not a mental asylum, it's a conference of conservatives, and these people are basically in positions of power. So what made me so horrified and so speechless, and how does it relate to freedom, and why, sort of just walking here in the forest, I spontaneously decided to make this video. And I don't have my gimbal with me, so I apologize, it might be a little bit shaky. There was one of these people there who started with saying he was born in the Soviet Union, and then he got to the UK, and that now is the time of free speech, and how free speech is championed by today's government, predominantly in the US. I was like watching this, and I was asking myself, is this person still a product of the old Soviet times? Because let's be honest, in Soviet communism or whatever other communism, you were always entitled to speak freely, express yourself, as long as you were being aligned with expressing the opinions of the establishment. Right? So there was there was no free speech at all. It was just repeating what the establishment said. And the fundamental value you needed to have was loyalty. Ringing a bell today? So when this person was speaking about championing the free speech, I was thinking about just some other videos I saw from American Tone House, where people challenging and asking and disagreeing with their representative were forcefully removed under the supervision of the sheriff, of the law enforcement, put into handcuffs and escorted out for expressing another opinion, for asking a non-establishment conform question. How is this freedom of speech? How can this person that says I was born in the Soviet Union before we got into the UK talk about freedom of speech and be really serious, unless he still has this mindset of a Soviet communist? But this time he's speaking on a conservative conference? Isn't that strange? So what could this actually really mean? Why is it that they are talking so much about freedom, but in the end are championing oppression and censorship? Right? Not just to stay with this Tone Hall example, and there are so many happening right now in the US. Just when the richest man on the world bought a social media platform in the name of absolute free speech, The second day, a few comedians made a joke about it, and he erased them from the platform. And the conservatives were championing this guy by saying absolute free speech, no cancel culture. And the first thing he does is exactly censorship and cancel. Just this time, he cancels different people than the platform was canceling the last time. This is not freedom of speech at all. Freedom, to be applicable, needs to be universal. If freedom is not universal, it's not freedom. So, what is it then that it's really actually meant by stating this freedom of expression and freedom of economy? It's not freedom from the people, for the people. It is freedom as a privilege. It means certain people who are in the privileged class will have the opportunity to express themselves in any shape or form they want, while people not in this prestige class will be persecuted, or are persecuted right now, right? For expressing themselves freely. Now, in the 20th century, we had two types, and I oversimplified, there was much more, but two major types of establishments. You had the so-called Free West, and with free it really varied which country you were in. Definitely free was meaning something else in Western Germany, in the UK or in the US. And you had this Eastern Soviet communist bloc. And in this Eastern bloc, there was as well a privileged class. Not so much economically, but politically. In a sense, they had much more leaning room of freely expressing themselves. Let me give you an example. One of the few surviving establishments from that era is one of the craziest dictatorships on earth. It's North Korea. And in North Korea, there is no one free to express himself. Everybody needs to and must comply. Hell, you get sent into concentration camps or executed just for not smiling enough if the leader goes by, or not crying enough if a state official does. But there is one person who is absolutely free to say and do whatever he wants, at least in private, and that's the dictator himself. A couple of years ago, his whole Apple TV library leaked, so we know, and we know even more. This person studied in Switzerland, in this private school for millionaires and sons of dictators. There was the son of Gaddafi at that time in the same school, maybe in the same class. There were princes or royals from Arabic countries. And there was this son of the North Korean dictator, who is the North Korean dictator today. So, only because someone champions freedom in his propaganda or words is not making it free. Keep in mind, just to go back to the socialists again, how many of those social republics were called People's Republic, like China People's Republic, right? Or the Democratic Republic of East Germany. Right? That was Eastern Germany, was called the Democratic Republic. Right? Had little to do with democracy, basically nothing. But this is how it was called. So today, these speeches of freedom actually mean a different form of privilege. It's no longer the privilege of the elite communist class in the East that was ruling the society and were to a certain degree very free to say and do what they want. But keep in mind the check and balances was the Communist Party itself. So there was always some inner fighting. That was a sort of a form not to go too far and not to become a second Stalin in a cult of personality. On a broader spectrum, you have these cults in North Korea, certainly. So nowadays, if this form of hate conservatism that is taking over the world, that is not constructive in building a prosperous society, but is very efficient in expressing and destroying everything else except the creation of privileged values. This time the ideology is on wealth fixated. So those who are privileged by being rich from a certain degree will be privileged in the system to be free. The rest obviously won't. That's just on the freedom of expression. The part that goes hand in hand with this sort of silent oppression in the name of freedom is the economic. So now we saw how these champions of free speech are actually censoring and using state enforcement the same way the oppressive communists did to oppress dissent, which means having a different opinion than theirs, even in what we see now are the United States. Then what is it doing on the other levels of freedom that you have? This is economical. Now, the whole idea of economic freedom is a really beautiful lie. You will work hard and you will do well. That's indoctrination, in a sense. Because to be free economically would mean that you have the means to actually be independent, which, unless you are born and inherit wealth, or unless you become one of the very, very lucky few, that there are so many lucky fews that it's basically a statistical error rather than any possibility or rule, then you will be within this system where, depends on which geography you are and which country you are in, you will more or less work and more or less get from paycheck to paycheck. Even if you would have a genius idea to build a company, to build a product, you would be dependent on funding. And you would need someone wealthy to support you. Chances are the wealthy person that supports you will have better lawyers than you. So how much in control will you be of this company, of your own idea? The musical industry, especially again in the United States, could sing volumes of great artists basically ending up on the streets, being forbidden to sing their own songs, and so on and so on. So economical freedom is a tricky point. And if now this hatred conservatism starts to champion what they call economic freedom, what they actually mean is deregulating whatever rules were set into place to keep people's dignity at work. Now, we had this situation before. When? Well, say 19th century, early 20th century. Just read Charles Dickens. The people, those examples of people working 20 hours a day, 6 days a week, and dying of overworking, it was like a daily occurrence at that time. freedom starts with dignity. And if you champion what is called economic freedom, you again champion just a certain set of rules only for the privileged. Now, if I say privileged, since there is a lot of context in different countries, it has nothing to do with race. Forget this whole racial privileged theory. First of all, you need to define what a race, and that's already complicated and makes no sense at all. Privileged are those who are profiting from the establishment, are close to the establishment, and have the means to influence the establishment in their own ways as individuals and as companies. This is privilege, for the sake of what I'm talking about. So, why would they need more freedom if they already have all this power? Because it will allow them to produce more profit. How can you make more profit if you're already rich? Well, by being able to exploit more of your so-called resources. Resources may be material, maybe what they call human resources. I mean, just think about it, what an atrocity it is to call a human a resource. It's a fundamental principle of dehumanization. You know, when I started working, and it's not so long ago, there was still a personal department. And I was the other day asked to teach a couple of lessons at a local university, and we've been talking about this with the professor, and she told me, yeah, this is an interesting research. I think our faculty of human resources would be interested. And I got shocked. Why are you calling this human resources? I mean, this is principally wrong. Calling a human a resource is, in my ears, almost criminal. This is the fundament of dehumanization. It's a different story if you decide about 1,000 human resources, or if you decide what happens with 1,000 people. Right? It's very strange how we as society just accepted this, what is in my eyes an atrocity. Now, this freedom by reducing all of the achieved standards of working means you can push further and won't be stopped. This definitely will be more freedom for certain small privileged group, but it will definitely mean less freedom for everybody else who is not in this privileged group. And as society, since we are built of individuals, but we are a group of individuals, the fundamental idea of democracy is that these individuals should have the power to influence the direction the society takes. And we are losing this in sake of privileged, powerful, that influence the whole society by means of owning media, by means of, I will call it owning politicians, because how can you be a politician basically without a strong group behind you? Again, you will become a small minority, which is a statistical deviation. The rule is you don't get to be elected basically in any democratic system without having a strong, powerful donor behind your back, who then asks you for a couple of favors. And shouldn't you do them, he goes to the boss of your party, or you just don't get his funding for the next cycle of elections. So, if we are lied to by so-called champions of freedom to actually take away our freedom, what then is freedom? What should we be looking for? Here is my point of view, my understanding. I started with saying that the fundamental basis for freedom is dignity. Let's define dignity. It has a material aspect and it has an immaterial aspect. In the 20th century, 21st century, let's say, dignity should be, because we have so many resources available, There are so many trillions of dollars in cycle around the world. We have the resources, we have the means. So dignity should be, you have a roof over your head with enough space and room for you to live. Not like in the 19th century where you owned a cotton processing factory and you took 3 or 4 families into one room and put them there and put a roof over their head. That's not a roof over your head. Well, let's call it a concentration camp. Yeah, why not? It's a camp. Concentrating workforce. Yes. Now, that's not how dignity looks. Dignity means you have your own private space just for yourself. It doesn't need to be big, but it needs to be able to close the door and have your own space with a decent size. Not just that you have a roof over your head. You are able to provide with quality, healthy food. It doesn't need to be much, it doesn't need to be luxurious, but it should be sufficient to live on and healthy enough not to make you sick in a few decades. This is the material aspect, where you have enough means to live according to your own rules, at least in your own small world. The immaterial aspect means respect. Dignity means that in whatever society you are, whatever part of the economy you represent, you go out of your small private space and everybody shows you respect for what you are doing. Whether you a factory worker, a nurse, accountant, police officer, or a manager, it really doesn't matter. You contribute to the society by working, and in some shape or form, your service or your product makes the society, makes the people better, whether they desire it as a luxury or whether they need it as a service, for example, a doctor. At the end of the day, you know you've worked and it makes sense. It's better for the society, and the society pays you respect if they see you on the streets because they know you are part of the whole. Could be an artist. So dignity gives us the ability to objectively be free in our own space and feel free from our surroundings and inside us. This is the foundation of freedom. Not just in a sense social, socio-economic, but as well spiritual. And this channel sort of focuses on the spiritual part. But spirituality gets crippled by censorship and oppression. It can never be completely eradicated, but it can be strongly reduced. And spirituality is one of the freedoms that we inherently have within ourselves. And for this freedom to grow, if we so choose, dignity is the fundamental founding stone